Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We have a special guest with us, our very own Tracy, here with us today. We are going to be talking about some of the soft skill topics that we cover a lot around this office. So Tracy is joining us from Austin. Tracy, will you just introduce yourself real quickly? Tell us a little bit about Tracy.
Absolutely. So I am a pharmacist by trade. I spent many years doing pharmacy things. I come from a long line of pharmacists. A few of my positions were quite atypical, and I loved that. And so when the opportunity presented itself to do this, I jumped on it immediately. I always laugh and tell candidates that sometimes I talk very quickly when we're on the phone, and it is not to pressure them. It's because I genuinely get excited about what I'm doing. Getting to talk pipeline all day long and science all day long really does kind of scratch that itch that I was afraid I would lose when I stepped out of traditional pharmacy. So this has been wonderful, and I've been at Symbio. It's flown. I'm on year 3 already.
That's exciting. And you've known Mary a lot longer than you've been at Symbio as well.
Yes, we actually met back in college, and we have stories we tell and stories we don't tell, but Mary and I have
maybe that's a different podcast.
Very long time.
I love it. I love it. Well, you told us what you like about the MSL world, but tell us what you like about recruiting MSL specifically. What is it about MSLs that you think has really just kept you loving your job every day?
You know, hearing the enthusiasm in their voices. When I call, I think MSLs just by their nature are friendly. They love to educate. They love to share. They love to talk science with me. And it truly feels like a friendship so often. I laugh and I say I have a friend in every state. And I think that I do. I am invested in a number of people. And it's just wonderful knowing that from here in Austin, Texas, I'm able to just expand my network and really connect with people, truly connect with people.
Yeah.
All across the U.S.
I love it. I love it. I, as you know, just got back from a trip in Colorado, and one of the places I took my husband and daughter to was a place that an MSL had recommended me. And so I had to text her and say, hey, we went, we loved it. Thank you. I feel like that's kind of one of my favorite benefits of knowing people all over the country is you're like, hey, give me the scoop. Give me the local scoop.
100%. I'm actually going to Chicago for the first time in my life in about 3 weeks, and I've already started hitting people up.
Yeah.
I want places to go and fun things to do.
Yeah. Oh, so fun. I love it. Well, we'll just go ahead and dive into our topic. Our topic today is on the art of asking great questions. And I asked you to do this topic because when it comes to soft skills and really some of the coaching that we do around that topic, I think you're a great person for that because you can deliver a hard message that is just, oh, so sweet. That's just the way you are. And you do it with such grace and with such class. And so I wanted to ask you some questions that our listeners might feel is valuable when they're trying to think about some of the soft skill side of interviewing. And, you know, how to be an effective interviewer. And part of that is asking great questions. I'm sure there is a great list out there of questions to ask in an interview, but asking great questions really reveals something about your mind, about the way you operate. And so my first question for you is, what would you say are some of the key elements of asking good questions?
I think I'll break it down to about 3 things. That's an easy number to remember.
Yeah.
But first of all, you want to show that you have done the research and you are prepared. So make sure that your questions aren't just grab bag questions. You want to really gear them towards the company and the position. You know, perhaps a new clinical trial has started or recent expansion occurred or They're going after a new label extension. Things like this show that you've done the research and really have the interest to make questions specifically for this position.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's a great idea is when you have your questions, and I always tell my candidates this, have a prelude to it that really says something that you want them to know about you. If we could design the interview, we would have the interviewer ask us exactly what we wanted them to know about us. So we could push all those buttons and say all those selling points. In actuality, that doesn't happen. So use your question as a time to kind of put those things forward. For example, if you want to know about collaboration, start with collaboration is really important to me, and it's been a big component of my career thus far. How will I be able to collaborate with other organizations or teams within this company? And it makes sure to let that hiring manager or that HR person know that collaboration is something that's of great importance to you. And I think the third thing that I would recommend is if you have the opportunity to ask more than one question, ask a question that lets the interviewer say something that makes them happy. People love endorphins, and they love to be able to talk about things that make them happy. So ask them, what keeps you at this company? What drew you to this company? You've been here for 10 years. What do you like best about this company? Giving them an opportunity to speak about something that really makes them joyful will make a lasting impression.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads me into my next question, is, joy is something that we can express in our body language. When somebody asks you that right question, or they say something that sparks your interest, you can almost see that in a person's body language, and that can change the dynamic of the interview. We just, Linda and I just did an episode about effective communication in a virtual environment, because it is a little bit more difficult to really feel and absorb somebody's energy over the computer in that virtual setting. And I think good questions can draw people in and invite people in more so, and pick up the slack for what we lose when we don't have so much of our body language to rely on. What are some common buzzwords in our industry where you would say word choice is so key? So, for example, do you use metrics versus how do you measure success? Things like that. What are some of the buzzwords?
That's probably one of the best ones right there.
Okay.
Metrics can be a pretty bad word. It's a necessary thing, and it's a fair question to want to have that information. But I think asking how they measure success is such a softer way to still get that answer you're after. Some of the other things that stand out to me, if you're applying for a position in a therapeutic area that perhaps you haven't gotten to do yet, and you're asked, do you have cardio experience? And I hear a lot, no, but I learned fast. I just don't like that phrase. I think it can be done in a much more enthusiastic, more humble way. For example, I haven't had the fortune of getting to do cardio yet, but I'm very enthused about it. And just as importantly, I am committed to preparedness. So I assure you, I will be ready with what you need me to do when you need me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some other buzzwords that come up typically in the interview process? A lot of these resources, and our kind of goal here with the podcast is to help create better interviewers and refine their skills. What are some other things or buzzwords that come up in interviews that you would say, word choice is so important?
I would think that most candidates would definitely stay away from a word like micromanage, but they want to know perhaps how the management style is. And I think a much better way to ask that question is, how can I be empowered to really run my territory? I want to make sure I do it well. What is in place to make sure that I am prepared and empowered, because I want to do a great job for the company. I think another thing is, I'm not a great big fan of the phrase lifelong learner. It's so cliche.
Mm.
And I think that sometimes it can be almost indicative of, I have a lot to learn. And I know when people use that, they really are trying to say that they're always ready to increase their knowledge. I think a better way to say that would be simply to say, I am so enthusiastic about embracing new knowledge. I'm open to change. I'm open to new ideas. And I love being an active listener for what people around me can bring to the table.
Hmm. Well, you bring up an interesting point too, because I think that being a learner, a lifelong long learner, is kind of just inherent to MSLs as scientists, as people who are driven by science. Like you said, it can almost be a little bit of a cliche because everybody is, right? It's like
Mhm.
saying there's cheese on pizza. Um, and so that's a great point. This is an opportunity where if you choose your words carefully, it can really be stand out in somebody's mind because all the other MSLs that you're interviewing against are probably calling themselves lifelong learners too. So when you can be a little bit more precise or, choose words that really draw out what it is that you're trying to say or are more specific in your intent, you can really take that interview in a completely different direction, I would say. The other area that I want your take on is when it comes to the topic of advancement, because inevitably, in some point in your interview process, somebody's going to ask you about your future goals. And, um, people who have maybe leadership aspirations, like they want to move into MSL management specifically. That is also something that you have to kind of choose your words carefully because if you're being interviewed by your boss, Ross either needs to be fired or promoted in order
Right.
to move into that position, right? So you need to kind of choose your words a little bit carefully. So how would you coach somebody around answering that question? If the honest answer is, well, I want your job, how do you kind of finesse that verbally?
Well, and I think that is such a good question to be asking right now because employers do want to know your long range plans. And I think a component of that is knowing that you're committed to being there for a while.
Yeah.
And I always encourage people to be honest, but to soften it a little and make sure that the take home message truly is that your primary focus at this point in this moment is the job at hand.
Yeah.
So I recommend answering it in a way that shows just that,
Mhm.
say, right now, my focus is on this position. I want to make sure I do it very well in a way that brings success to the company. And I know that in the process, I'm going to discover new talents I have and new passions that I have. And my hope is that I will be cultivated and allowed to explore those in a way that only brings more success to the company.
Mhm.
I hope that I am able to grow in a direction that most suits you and follows what we both discover my talents to be.
Mhm. This is why I asked you to come and talk about this topic because that is the perfect answer. I love it. I love all of it, and it's so important to finesse your words in these scenarios, especially when you are in a situation where this may be a hiring manager who's a little bit sensitive. I had a situation with a client of mine a couple of years ago, I guess it was now, where they had somebody that left the team and they backfilled that person. And that person only took that role really as like a holding place until they could find what they really wanted. They had moved out of a management role and they went into this MSL role basically, as a holding place and they left in under 6 months. And so the hiring manager, was sad and a little bit defeated because they took all this time investing into this person who had only stayed just such a short amount of time. So, going into that next interview process, the candidates that were being interviewed for that position, it would be really problematic if somebody came in there and kind of indicated, well, I'm only sticking around at my current company until I get a better opportunity. This is my goal. I want this to happen in the next year or so. But obviously, that's not going to align with the goals of the company because they're hiring you for the position they're hiring you for. And you have to be sensitive to those kinds of things as well, and careful with your wording because it may be perceived a completely different way than you intended just by virtue of the fact of what's just happened, why that position is even open. So really finessing how you talk about those things, I think, is super important. And communicating well, really knowing what you want, and articulating that well is so important. On that topic, moving into the next question, how to communicate well with optimism in your words specifically. How do you do this?
Oh, wow. Smiling, of course. And I always say, even when it is a phone call, smile. You can hear a smile. And I hear it from candidates when I talk to them. I know they hear it from me. It is such a true statement.
Yeah.
And then I think something that people need to really prepare themselves for in an interview is sometimes there are hard questions. And inevitably, our bodies can tense up and we can kind of purse our lips and, tighten our face. So having some forethought into what those questions might be and how you might answer them so that you're able to articulate it in a way that doesn't show, that it's evoking some sort of stress or tension in your body. For example, you may be asked, why are you looking for a new position? And it could be a very valid reason because you don't like your job for reason X, Y, and Z. Well, we don't want to go into a company and talk poorly about another company. So being prepared to answer that in a way where your body language doesn't change and your smile still stays on your face, and you choose words that really exemplify what it is you want, not what it is you feel that you're lacking. And a perfect example of that is when my children were very young and I would see kids out on the playground that didn't behave the way I wanted my children to behave. Or, perhaps other mothers thought that of my children too. I totally admit I had 2 boys, so who knows? But instead of telling my child, I don't like what that other child is doing, I would instead say, I really like that you don't do this. And allow my child to kind of draw that correlation, but it sounds much more like a reward or a benefit or optimism in that I'm noticing something good. And I think you can do that with an interview as well. If you feel that the metrics are too intense where you are, instead say, I'm really anxious to find a place that allows me to use my creativity because I really want to help establish a great foundation and footprint for my territory. And I'm anxious to jump in a number of different ways. I really love quality work. And it's instead kind of taking what you're lacking and putting it in a way of, I'm going to see it when I go with you. And it's just a much softer way to answer. I'm all about the softer answers while still being very truthful.
Yeah, that's why they call them soft skills, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So my last question for you is, can you give me one example of a question we often get as recruiters? This would be an interview question that comes up that people can kind of get a little frazzled when answering because they want to communicate it well. They want to give a great response, but it is the type of question that may offer a little bit of negativity. What would be an example of a question that you get as a recruiter that you often coach people around?
Oh, I can think of 2 that jump out at me right away. They're kind of neck and neck.
Okay.
But tell me something about yourself that you would like to improve, or share a weakness that you have. And I think people freeze up thinking that they're going to show something that makes them look fallible or not like the best choice for the position. And keep in mind that, first of all, having a flaw is normal. And being able to identify it shows emotional intelligence because you're reflecting and you're thinking and you're improving. But there are a lot of things that I would imagine we're all very guilty of that could answer that question. For example, maybe you get too emotional or too invested in some of the stories and you really need to learn to kind of release a little bit of that. Or maybe you don't do quite enough in the form of self-care because You're learning a lot of data and you're going 90 miles an hour and you need to pause sometimes and just create a better work-life balance.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're too self-critical. I know that is a flaw I have, and that you're always reliving every interaction and beating yourself up instead of using that to, in a powerful way to just be better next time.
Yeah.
So there are several answers you can give there that aren't so self-deprecating. Another question that I think is hard for some people is, tell me about a rough interaction you had with a KOL or a peer.
Okay.
And
that's a good one.
This happens too. We're humans. And I think accepting that there are bad days that people have. And as much as I try to be optimistic and happy and smiley all the time, I am sure I've had a bad day. And being able to own it if you're at fault. But more importantly, I think it's having mercy, going back to the drawing board, seeing people as individuals, and knowing that you want to interact with them in a way that relates more to them. Maybe know something personal about them. Maybe recognize that if it's noon, they're hungry, so it's better to come at 1. Just little things that allow you to see them as individuals and make you better, so that your next interaction is great.
I love it. I love it all. And I am going to invite our listeners to send us a text. We unfortunately can't respond, to send us a text with those questions that you feel like are the trickiest. And we'll have you back, Tracy, for a follow-up episode to give some examples of how to finesse those kind of trickier questions, because I think everybody has a desire to handle them with grace and with truth and sincerity. But, you also want to represent the situation well, represent how you handled it well. And that is a skill like anything else that we can always be improving. So thank you so much for joining us, for your insights and sharing those with our listeners. Our goal, with this podcast is to provide resources for people trying to break into the MSL role, or people who are already in the MSL role, just looking to kind of refine their skills. And I think the art of asking great questions is something that anybody can learn about. So thank you so much for
this. Was a great way to end my day. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks, Tracy.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.